Hello, and welcome back to Chagpar MD. I'm Dr. Anise Chagpar. Have you ever wondered about artificial sweeteners? Like, how bad are they for your health? Do they actually cause weight gain, diabetes, metabolic syndrome? Can they cause dental caries? And what do they do to your gut microbiome? What are the data? Should you be drinking diet soda? Or is sugar really better than that? Or should you just be doing water? And what's the difference between all of them? I mean, should we be going for stevia and erythritol? Or is aspartame and sucralose okay? How do you tell the difference between all of these? Well, these are a lot of questions that I've pondered about for some time and decided to dig into the data. So I'm here today to share with you all of the evidence to answer all of these questions. So what do you say? Let's get started. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I was the biggest diet soda addict on the face of the planet, I'm quite certain. And I continue to use a lot of artificial sweeteners. But are they really healthy? Am I doing myself a favor? Or am I really damaging my health? Well, these are questions that I've been asking myself, and I thought maybe you'd be asking the same questions. And so I thought we'd dig into the data and give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about artificial sweeteners. Now, when we think about artificial sweeteners, there certainly are a number of varieties that are on the market today. And they go by a variety of names. So saccharin is sweet and low, aspartame is marketed as NutraSweet, sucralose as Splenda, and there are others that are more natural, like Stevia, which is marketed as Truvia, etc. Each of these is a lot sweeter than regular table sugar. And because of that, people have really questioned the benefits and the harms of these artificial sweeteners. Now, on the good side, many people argue that because these are non-nutritive sweeteners, that is to say that they really have no calories, that they may help to combat obesity, metabolic syndrome, and diabetes when used in place of sugar. And because they can reduce caloric intake, they may actually help you to lose weight. On the other hand, some people argue that it may limit the tolerance for other less sweet foods because these artificial sweeteners are far more sweet than regular sugar. And so we're kind of tricking our bodies into thinking we're tasting something sweet, but we're not getting the calories associated with it, which may cause more sweet cravings. Well, there was a study that was done called the San Antonio Heart Study, where they looked at people in an observational way in the Framingham Heart Study who drank 21 diet drinks per week or more and found that they were twice as likely to become overweight or obese than those who did not drink diet soda. Now, again, this is an observational study. So were people who drank diet drinks more likely to have other habits that may also cause them to become more overweight or obese? And those who didn't drink diet soda, well, what were they drinking instead? So again, we need to look at these data with a little bit of a skeptic view, but those are the data. Some argue that these diet sodas and artificial sweeteners may become addictive, and some even have found that daily consumption of diet drinks results in a 36% higher risk of metabolic syndrome and a 67% higher risk of diabetes. This comes from a multi-ethnic study of atherosclerosis. And again, as with all of my videos, I will leave you the links to the actual studies and the data in the description box below. But if we look at randomized control trials, now this is level 1 evidence, the cream of the crop when it comes to data. There are several studies that actually demonstrate that consumption of non-nutritive sweeteners actually causes less hunger and people consume fewer calories when they replace sugary foods and beverages with artificially sweetened alternatives. There was a randomized control trial called Choice, Choose Healthy Options Consciously Every Day, where they compared diet beverages to water. Now, if you haven't caught our water video, I'll leave a link for it here. It's really a great watch. In any event, what they found in this randomized control trial, where they randomized people to either have diet beverages or water, is that both groups reduced their absolute intakes of daily energy per day, which means how many calories they were taking in. They also reduced carbohydrates, fat, protein, saturated fat, total sugar, added sugar, and other carbohydrates. Furthermore, they found that people who had the diet beverages actually reduced their dessert intake more than the people who were drinking water at month number 6. Now, the people randomized to drink water had a greater increase in fruits and vegetables at month number 6. So take that data as you will. There was another randomized control trial looking at sucrose, which is sugar, versus artificial sweeteners. And it was a 10-week trial. What they found, again, the sucrose group, that is to say the artificial sugar consumers, actually had increased total energy consumption, body weight, and fat mass, all of which were decreased in the artificial sweetener group. Also, those randomized to having sucrose or sugar had an increase in their blood pressure, whereas artificial sweetener decreased this as well. What do you do when you want to put all of the data together? Well, you do a meta-analysis. And there was a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials that demonstrated that low-calorie sweeteners reduced all of the outcomes that we might be interested in terms of body weight, BMI, and weight circumference. Now, if you haven't caught the video on the 5 numbers you need to know, I'll leave you a link for that here too. But it's important to understand that these artificial sweeteners actually were moving people in the right direction for those numbers when you look at randomized control trial data. Now, what is the effect on diabetes? Again, a meta-analysis of prospective cohort studies found that there was an increased risk in individuals who are at the highest quartile of non-nutritive sweetener consumption versus those at the lower quartile. So the more of these artificial sweeteners you have, the higher the risk of diabetes compared to those at the lowest quartile. And in fact, found that the relative risk of diabetes increased by 3% for each additional daily serving of non-nutritive sweeteners. However, compared to sugar-sweetened beverages, the same study found that diet sodas have a reduced association with diabetes. So it really depends on to what you compare. And remember, those were all prospective cohort studies. Well, what if you do a meta-analysis looking at randomized controlled trials? Here I give you 2 meta-analyses. One was done by Toes et al., who actually looked as their endpoint, not so much at diabetes, but actually at blood glucose levels, and found that those who consumed non-nutritive sweeteners or artificial sweeteners actually had a reduction in their blood glucose level. Similarly, there was a meta-analysis of a randomized controlled trials looking at stevia, which is a natural sweetener, again found a reduction in fasting glucose compared to those who were not taking the artificial sweeteners. So it seems like these may actually reduce your risk of diabetes depending on what you compare to. Now, people often ask about the gut microbiome, and there have been small studies looking at saccharin, which demonstrated that this altered gut microbiome. And this led people to hypothesize that this may lead to poor blood sugar levels and poor blood sugar control. Now, it's important to remember that all of these were done in mice. And we all know that mice and men are 2 entirely different species. Similarly, when you think about cancer, I can't tell you the number of times people used to tell me when I used to drink so much diet soda that eventually this would cause cancer. Well, when I actually dug into the data, it turns out that there was only one study back in 1970 which found that mice fed extremely high amounts of saccharin and sialimate actually had an increased risk of bladder cancer. Both of those were pulled off the US market. Cyclamate remains off the US market, but saccharin has been reinstituted because there have now been a number of human studies that have demonstrated no link between cancer risk and artificial sweetener consumption. What about your dental health? Well, it turns out that artificial sweeteners do not react with the bacteria in your mouth, so they don't cause tooth decay. And in fact, there was a study looking at sucralose, which is not the same as sucrose, which is sugar, but sucralose, which goes by the name Splenda, which found that this was less likely to cause tooth decay than sugar. Not surprising. Sugar reacts with the bacteria in your mouth causing tooth decay, whereas sucralose or Splenda does not. Now, certainly, these artificial sweeteners are not for everybody, and people should proceed with caution. So, for example, people who have PKU or phenylketonuria can't metabolize phenylalanine, which is an amino acid that's found in aspartame. So if you have PKU or a family history of that, you may want to stay away from aspartame. Similarly, if you are allergic to sulfonamides, you may want to avoid saccharin, which falls into the same category. The other thing that people may be interested in is some natural alternatives. So a lot of people don't like artificial sweeteners like aspartame or saccharin because of the artificial chemicals that are used to make these. So there are some natural alternatives. Stevia, for example, comes from a plant, and it has been found to lower blood pressure in people with hypertension by 6 to 14%. It can lower blood sugar levels in people with diabetes, and it may reduce cholesterol and improve insulin sensitivity. Erythritol, which is also a natural alternative, often partnered with stevia, is found also not to spike blood sugar or insulin levels and has no effect on blood lipids or cholesterol. Sorry for the typo. Xylitol also has been found to reduce cavities compared to sugar. May improve bone density, doesn't raise blood sugars, but it is toxic to dogs. So if you have canines in the house, you may want to be careful with the xylitol. So in summary, the evidence is all over the map. In general, however, it seems that randomized controlled trials have demonstrated that artificial sweeteners actually can reduce your risk of diabetes, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, and your caloric intake compared to sugar alone. And that only makes sense because you're essentially taking in fewer calories. I leave all of this evidence for you to decide what's best for you. But if you're someone like me who likes to have something sweet without all of the calories and finds that this can be done in moderation, it's nice to know that the evidence backs us up. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. Remember, we're trying to develop a community who really does like to look at the evidence in terms of best practices for your health and wellness. Until next time, I'm Dr. Anise Chagpar, wishing you all a safe and healthy week.